Welcome back to the Bootroom Podcast. Now, today we've got another guest in, Andy Driscoll. But before we introduce him, Harry Hennings is back.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Andy, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. So, could you please start us off with your early days playing football? Who got you into the game?
Who got me into the game? I wouldn't say my dad. My dad didn't know that I was good at football as a kid. Somebody probably told him because he was effectively, he liked boxing. So he wasn't like a football dad. He became a football dad after that. So I'm not sure. I'd need to know. Yeah, so effectively, I started playing football and obviously loved football in the garden, as you do, all the time, schools. In those days, I remember playing for, it was, like year 1 to year 5. Mm-hmm. I remember playing for when I went to senior school and I was a first year senior, the 5th years asked me to join in the playground. And so then I played in the 5th year at school, which was before you can't do it now. But I played for the 5th years when I was the first year senior. Wow. So they put me in. So then, then Middlesex and things like that. And then my first was Chelsea, probably under 11s. I can't even remember. They probably come to watch me at school. But my dad was a QPR supporter, so he didn't want me to go play for Chelsea. So he got me to QPR. And that's probably when I started supporting Chelsea. So in the old days, Kerry Dixon. But he tried to push me to QPR because he was a QPR supporter, which is fair enough. And then this was schoolboys. It's still called that, schoolboys. And then there were scouts about, like there is now, coming to watch school football and Middlesex. I had a few scouts trying to get me to go further. But obviously my mum and dad were like, with school and it's miles. My dad had a big job in sort of Gatwick, so it was hard to get me back to pick me up from school. So my mum would have had to take me on the bus. But then I ended up leaving QPR and going to Arsenal through a scout. And at the time, a scout, he was called Charlie Faulkner, that he scouted everybody, all the top players at West Ham. He basically said, why have you gone to Arsenal? Because it was so far from me, West London. And it was like 3 buses after school. My mum would pick me up. And so I ended up going to West Ham. And West Ham, that was when John Lyle was the manager. Billy Bonds was still playing at 40. West Ham was good, but I was doing my homework in the car to get everything done, and obviously I wasn't that smart, so I just wanted to play football, didn't want to do any schoolwork. And I was okay at school. I behaved. And then we sort of heard a rumour that West Ham weren't going to sign me. Whether they were or they weren't, I left and went to Brentford because I'd already had sort of Brentford scout Colin Lee. He was the youth team manager at the time. I think he came to watch a school match and said, come and sign for Brentford. And Brentford was West London. So, and then I went, so that was youth team YTS a long time ago.
How was it to make the Youth Cup semi-finals then with Brentford? That's quite a big achievement, isn't it, early on in your life?
So that was Man United FA Youth Cup semi. No, that was quarterfinals, Man United. Watford was semi-finals. I think David James played Rod Thomas, who was then like an England schoolboy. They were the equivalent of Cat 1 and we were the equivalent of Cat 3 before Cat
Big
happened.
Difference, right?
Yeah. Colin Lee took the youth team, and I wouldn't call it revolutionary, but his thought process was amazing. He got us all together. We were a unit. We were fit, very fit. And I just think he knew what to do in terms of the players. We had Marcus Gale, Paul Buckle, Kelly Haig, all made, Jason Cousins, so a few others. Ashley Bays, who's still at AFC Wimbledon, as goalkeeping coach. He was in goal. So we were good, we were strong, but we probably came up against a good team after playing 65, 70 games in that season, because we were playing in the reserves as well. So in terms of volume, we had youth team games, we had Youth Cup, we had League Cup, we had FA Youth Cup, and reserves.
That's mental.
So in the end, we didn't win anything because potentially fatigue.
So you got called up then to make your first team appearance against Bolton, obviously a huge club. It was a 4-2 defeat. I'm just trying to ring some bells.
Yeah.
6th of May, 1989. What was that like to be called up against Bolton in the first team of Brentford?
Trying to think now. That's a long time ago. To one thing that is, I think I wasn't nervous at all.
Wow.
So I wasn't nervous playing in the first team, and I would probably be more nervous now, or later in my career when I think I've played or I need to get back to those that level. But I wasn't nervous at all. Didn't really come. I just went out and played, which they say the kids they have nothing. They just go out and they play. That's where I think you then get a bit more nervous as you get older because you then think, right, I need to play well. I need to do this. But yeah, it was good. It was a long time ago.
And then obviously after Eddie May's injury, you sort of broke through and playing the final 12 games of the season, scoring 2 goals. So from that moment on, did you sort of think like I can kick on from here and become quite an integral member of the first team squad?
I was still young. I don't know. Thinking about it now, reflecting on it, you think that you think you've arrived, I suppose, as such. And I had a chance. But in football, you never know what's around the corner. So had I known what now, I might have done different things. So, yeah.
I think, though, those 2 goals in the last 12 games is quite some feat for a young player. Do you remember one of the 2 goals, the celebration?
I remember both of the goals. The first one, I fell over on it, on the goal line. I had the tightest, shortest hot pants shorts on. And Terry Evans, who's like 6'5", picked me up and I'm like 5'7". So I look really, really small against Terry Evans. He picked me up because I literally fell over it. I could have missed it on the goal line. The second one, I can't remember who the goalie was, but he played it. Dean Oldsworth flicked it on, and then I got to it just before the defender flicked it over my head and then spun him and then put it. George Wood played in goal. The George Wood, left foot. Yeah.
But obviously, so it was quite a high end to the season for you, and then obviously you must have been quite confident. But then, unfortunately, to go on and suffer quite a serious knee injury, was that sort of quite a challenging moment for you to overcome?
So firstly, it wasn't that serious. So the time, yes, it was
during pre-season.
But it wasn't. It was just cartilage.
Okay.
It just wasn't diagnosed well. Hopefully, you'd hope that it would get better now. I trained all through the summer because I was told by somebody, now you're a pro, now you're going to play in the first team, you need to kick on. And he had no bad intentions for me, but what really I should have done is rest because I played in the first team, in the reserves, in the youth team, and was a kid and had to deal with all that. And I dealt with it okay, but then I needed a rest to then sort of get stronger and get back and get fresh. But instead, I then trained through the summer because I wanted to be a pro, whereas somebody else might have said, no, I'm going on holiday with my parents. Oh, okay, go away for 2 weeks. I was like, okay, yeah, I want to do it. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday, running around Griffin Park, the track, running up and down the terracing, people on my back, doing exercises. So this is why my thing is now when it comes to like football players and training football and fitness, because I did that all the summer, and then I literally came back first week, I did my knee, and when I spoke to the specialist, he said this happens in September, October, and then I told him what I'd been doing all through the summer, and he was like, oh, there you go then. That's why.
When you were training throughout the summer, obviously you were expected to come back and probably build on for what you did in the previous season. But you made one further appearance in that 1992 season, right? And then you got released.
Yeah.
So what was that like then to go from, I'd suppose, a really big high in that season just before the injury?
Yeah. So it did affect me. You can't not say that it didn't affect me. I remember playing. I came on against Bury, I think it was, and they were losing. So I was literally never going to do anything. Coming on, changing the game, would maybe 2-3-0 down, I think. And And like I've spoke to Phil Holder since, and I completely understand as a manager what they have to do. They have to look after everybody. We're just trying to look after ourselves. So we're sort of thinking individual. They're thinking team and squad. So he did what he wanted, what he thought was best. And now I spoke to him and I said, I get that. But I sort of said, look, if you're not going to play me, just release me because I'll go somewhere else.
Even on a full-time contract, though?
I didn't really have... the contract wasn't great.
Okay.
The contract was nearly up. So it was like, and obviously I was going through, issues. So, yeah, I was fine about, if somebody doesn't want you,
Leave.
just be honest.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's fine. If you don't want me, if you're not going to play me, and what I remember now saying, because I said to him, look, I'm training, and I think I'm training as well as I can do. That's another story if you think, but other players are playing. So if you play me and I'm rubbish, I'll put my hand up and go, fine. But you're not playing me. So that's where I think he put me in, and I was never going to do that. Had he put me in a few more times and I was rubbish, I'd be like, okay, fine. If I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. But it was just once. So that's why I said, might as well release me.
And then after you were released, then you sort of started quite a long spell of different clubs here and there.
Yeah.
Where should we start? Reading or Yeading, Chertsey?
Yeah, loads. So then obviously I always had an attitude where I would sort of say, if I'm going to run around and chase the ball back, I don't want to then smash it long and lose it again. So, and in those days, still now, we play long ball. And it was like, I left there because I didn't like the football. And I left there, didn't like the football. I also got into fitness and sort of did personal training. So then I was always at the gym getting really, really fit. And I would start the season and I'd look amazing. But I would just be generally fit, not football fit. And then I'd tweak my hamstring, and obviously I would then I'd be injured for a few weeks, and then performances. And it went downhill, and it was like every season. I'd get really, really fit, general fit, and then start, and then I'd look $1 million, and then I'd tweak because I wasn't football fit, and then it was then.
Spiral.
Yeah.
How do you build onto that football fitness thing? Because there is a big difference.
Yeah, well, football fitness is playing football. Literally.
Yeah.
So it's about going through the pain of not being able to play.
Play football, because how many times do you do pre-season training where you run without a ball? And obviously in a game of football, only there's a ball with one player, but you run without a ball in football, but there's a purpose. But when you're running around the pitch and you're going in the gym and you're doing all that and you're like really, really fit, and then it's a different fitness in the first game, you're breathing. You are heavily breathing because you are knackered. So that says that you're not football fit. And this happens every single year for the last 35 years, and it's still happening. I'm seeing professional teams running around the track, pre-season training. Still.
What would you do though? Would you get the ball at the feet? Would you?
Yeah. So when Mourinho took over at Chelsea, the balls were out first, and he said a piano player doesn't run around the piano; he sits down and plays the piano. And it's not rocket science. You play football, and you manipulate the football sessions to overload. If you want to play at a higher tempo, you might go from 11 to 11 to 10v10 to 9v10. You might take one player off to overload, so you're playing 10v11. So then you're having to run more. Well, and then it's a thinking thing for the player, because in games now players are getting sent off. So why don't we play 10v11 more? So then if we're talking about resilience, player resilience in games, train 10v11, train 9v11. And then when it goes to 11v11, it's easier.
Yeah. So if you were to take over a job now, is that sort of the style that you'd implement on your players then?
Football,
Yeah.
fitness,
Yeah.
totally. We play football.
Yeah, of
and
course.
that's the rule. The exceptions to the rule would then be you take them out of the training to do X, Y, and Z. But the starting point is football. The starting point is, how do you want to play this year? The starting point is, what's the numbers? If it's 11v11, the starting point is when the games, etc., and you build around that. The exception is, okay, let's go in the gym. Does it help? Maybe, but it's not going to make you pass the ball better. It's not going to make your transition. So football is there for football.
So in these first 2 years of non-league, well, first, do you want to just clarify the reason as to why there's so many clubs on the list? Because we won't talk about all of them.
Oh, yeah. Yes, there's more that I can't even remember. And that's it. I just left because I didn't like it. And if I wasn't good enough, I wasn't good enough.
So you signed for Reading and Torquay. Well, yeah, trials of them, sorry.
Trials, yeah.
Both unsuccessful.
Yeah.
You joined Yeading. But I'm really curious about going to New Zealand.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Yeading there. Yeading.
Yeading, yeah.
Do you want to mention anything about that?
So Yeading was probably the first club that I went to, outside of like sort of professional. I think when you're at a professional club, even though I played in the first team, we come out of professional and we're like, I was at a professional club, but really you're only apprentice or something like that. So it's like,
to boost your ego.
Yeah. Well, we just think but there's some good players in non-league.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they didn't become professional, but there's some good teams and good players. And so if you played and you were professional and I was professional minimal, then you might have had a shout to be like, up there. But these players, but I was in the youth team at such and such. That means nothing. You go to a decent standard men's senior football and it's decent. And so that's the difference. I went there and I was thinking, I've played probably. And it was a good standard. I can't remember how long I stayed. But I had a daughter as well. So at the time of getting injured, leaving professional football, I had a daughter as well. So I had lots of things going on. And probably the New Zealand thing happened because, like when your parent and I've got 3 daughters, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. I got a phone call. Do you want to come and play in New Zealand? Yes. And I literally left. It was wrong because I left, like my ex was looking after my daughter, and that's probably the worst thing I did because I found out that she was, as I walked off and I went for 3 months, she was crying her eyes out and she was 3, 4, and I regret that. But it was, do you want to come and play in New Zealand? And you go there, and the funny thing is I became a midfielder enforcer, and I couldn't, can't tackle to save my life. I've got injured trying to tackle somebody. But out there, because you're like, nobody knows you, I'm going around smashing, not like smashing, in the old days, you go through the tackle, through the ball, and they're all thinking I'm really hard. I come back to England, I've become like softy again because they all know that I remember dislocating my shoulder trying to do somebody, and it was literally the ball, the foot, did a somersault, landed, done my shoulder. That's why I don't tackle, because I'm rubbish. But in New Zealand, I'm going through the ball, through the player, and like giving it that I'm hard, like I'm Michael Essien. But New Zealand was good. New Zealand was excellent. I scored one of the goals of the season, for the team I played for. Ricky Herbert, I was talking about this the other day. Ricky Herbert was my manager. So Ricky Herbert was the All Whites in the World Cup. He played for the All Whites in the other World Cup. He played for Wolves, and that was one of his first jobs before he took over the All Whites. And a fella called Billy McClure, and he was a Scouser. Was he a Scouser? He played for Liverpool reserves, and he got to New Zealand and played. He was top player. And obviously, New Zealand said, come on, you can play for us. And he played in the All Whites. Now, he was old, left foot, still a top player. So they had some good players out there. And, we're all arrogant, the English league is the best and the strongest and all that. And we forget about there is some really good players, really good leagues.
Before you mention about what you're going to say, I just wanted to say about the lifestyle in New Zealand. Was it?
That's what I was going to come on to.
Amazing. Yeah. New Zealand is an amazing country. So I've got family out there. So I managed to see my family that my family over here hadn't seen.
Okay.
So I got to meet them, and like Red Stripe? They party, they train, and then they have a beer and a barbecue, and so the lifestyle. It was Auckland, it was New Zealand's a beautiful country.
But what I was going to say was to go from Reading to Torquay's far enough, but then to go from Reading to New Zealand, that's the other side of the world. Were there any sort of nerves that kicked in though, thinking I'm going to the other side of the world?
No,
none.
No, because as I say, it was like, parents were like, oh, you should have done this, should have done that, like they do.
And when you get to that age, you're just
and
like,
then,
no.
And then somebody rang me up and said, "Do you want to come to New Zealand?" I've got somebody turned up with like a open ticket. It was like £1,200 in those days and they said, "There's your ticket," and I basically went.
Wow.
And I nearly went. So with Ricky, I nearly signed again. So basically, I nearly signed again for the following season. But I wanted to go to Australia and play in Australia and then come back. And then I spoke to my daughter. And I was like, no, I can't leave her. I should never have left her in the first place. Yeah. But yeah, so then I didn't bother. But that would have been good in hindsight. Selfish me. Go to Australia because that league was better than the New Zealand league. Because the year I played in New Zealand, they stopped flying. So they used to fly north to South Island, and it was a big league. They basically stopped it, and they carried it on the following year. But in Australia, it was Sydney Olympic. Those teams, again, I'm a dinosaur. So, So Wellington, Phoenix, things like that, they came out and then started playing in the A-League much longer afterwards.
Based on where we are doing this podcast, I think it's only right to speak about Hayes. So you signed for them.
Yeah. Terry Brown.
And what was that like?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. It was good. Some good boys. There was old players or older, experienced players. It was a good. It was a good team spirit. It was good. That was Terry Brown. He took over. I went there before Brown. He took over and he came in. But again, it's like I played Sunday League football in Hayes, so it was like like going to Yedding and then playing for Hayes, going to Brentford, being in West London, playing for everybody else. It was like I was coming back home. So played for Hayes a couple of times, I think.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It's mad that you forget it.
I know. I've forgotten the teams I played for. I've forgotten the players, the people I know, even personal training. I've forgotten some of the personal training clients.
Really?
Famous people. Yeah.
Wow. Mental.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of more than one consecutive sort of spell at a club, you had 3 at St Albans City.
Yeah.
First one was quite good, 10 goals and 45 appearances.
Yeah.
And then back to Hayes, then back to St Albans. So it was sort of yo-yoing between the two.
Yeah.
And then after your third spell at St Albans, then it was back to Yedding, then Staines, then Walton. So then obviously St Albans and Hayes were done, and then it was like a new chapter at Staines, Walton,
Yeah.
Brookhouse.
Brookhouse, yeah. So Staines, a fella called Alan Boone was the owner. He's the best owner in men's senior football non-league. He passed away a few years ago. He was the best. What he did at Staines. St Albans, I went because ex-teammate at Brentford, Alan Cockram, was there. We had that was a good team. We had really top players there. Steve Clark, Barry Blackman, Martin Duffield, Alan Cockram, Kevin Mudd, Erskine Smart. We were good, and we were that was the year that they said kick-ins.
Oh yeah.
So that was the year kick-ins, and our chairman was part of the league, and our manager Alan Cockram. So he was brought up at Spurs. So you midfield, you're brought up the right way. You don't bypass the midfield. Everything goes through, Steve Perriman to Glenn Hoddle. Yeah. So you don't play long ball, you play proper football. And so St Albans, we only had really one defender, Kevin Mudd, scaffolder, centre-back. I played, he was centre-back, that was it. And we had Gareth Howells, goalie, who was quality on the ball as well. And we just played. And I played left-back, and I can't defend, but it was like left-back, left wing. And so that year they said, right, kick-ins, and Cockers was like, nah, not doing it. Because then, well, why not? Well, you could, if you're losing 1-0, get the ball in the box. Nah, principles.
That's a corner,
He said,
right?
we're going to throw.
You're kicking. Could you do fun?
You kick him from the sides.
You just,
So
what?
instead of a throw-in?
Yeah. So they did it. I know, madness. But literally, it was like, you're losing 1-0, just kick it in the box.
Yeah.
And we get that. But Cockers was like, nah, principles, we're going to throw it. But our chairman was on the board and he was saying, what do you mean? He said, no, we're still gonna throw it. We're not gonna kick it. And there was teams at proper long ball, and they literally launched it. They launched it in the box, and luckily we had Muddy, and Howsey was a good keeper. But we played football. St Albans, Clarence Park pitch was like a billiard table. It was good. But again, there was always me. Like, you know, some of the things I did, silly.
Well, I know a lot of these teams, like Brookhouse, for example.
Brookhouse.
I think they're still quite a reputable team in
Yeah.
like non-league, because non-league is so diverse and so well known.
Yeah.
So what was it for you to jump between all these clubs? Was it just normal for you, just football?
Yeah. As I say, it came back to the thing where, you know, being a personal trainer, I thought I understood about getting fit for football when clearly I didn't. And I just then got fit, and I was really fit and strong. Then when played football and tweaked my hamstring or tweaked my groin, and then missed for a few weeks, then obviously I wasn't as good in the performances. And I did produce some good performances still in that, you know, for Crawley. But then the minute I got injured, and then, you know, in those days I liked to beer and put on weight and was rubbish basically. So I went from good to bad.
And then after that, you know, like long spell, different clubs, then you started managerial on the coaching side of it. And am I right to say your first role was sort of a player assistant manager at Hounslow Borough?
Yes, so that was with Sparksy.
With Sparks,
So,
yeah.
Sparksy.
What was that like then?
I don't know really.
Well, why did you step into management?
Because I was always saying, so I was always saying to people that at the end, if you're the manager and you want to play long ball, the players either accept it or you leave. But if you're the manager, we play this way, or you leave.
Yeah.
Like, I would wanted to then say, well, okay, because it was like, you can't play football, you haven't got enough, the rubbish that I've heard, we haven't got players that can play football. If we played football, we would then improve them potentially as football players. We overload them, we play them, they get fitter at passing out from the back. You know, the intention of like playing out from the back is, well, we practice it with pressure, and you'll get used to it.
Yeah.
There's a fine line between, well, the other team's going to come and press and nick it and score, and if you then lose your job because you keep losing, but if it's developmental, you want to develop the players to be able to play out from the back. So it was like, well, I'm just going to do it. So I'm not getting paid, you know, big bucks. So I'm not going to lose my job. If I do lose my job, so be it. We're going to play football. And so that's why then I sort of, and I didn't have a coaching qualification either, which I would say you do need you do need to get your coaching badges. But I was just like player coach, player manager, and like, we're going to play out from the back. End of. If you don't like it, tough, go and leave and play long ball somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what I was. I know I was joking, but I remember saying to someone, look, if you want to improve as a player, you can stay here and play football. If you want to smash it, go somewhere else.
So why are you so like set on playing that sort of no tippy tappy?
Yeah, well, I'm not. So that's when I was. So even then, I wouldn't say I was tippy tappy. What I was okay. We invite them on to get the ball into a centre forward that can hold the ball up, and then we counter from there. So my intention, without a qualification, was if there's space, we play out and we get them to come onto us, and then we straight in to there. And we did that. A team trained, and they trained to, Driscoll plays too much. He overplays. And I was like, oh, okay. So we did. We literally played to bring them on to then get it into the... And that was probably my best signing. Lee Channel, played for Maidenhead, really quick, but he was coming back into it. And I was like, you're a bit unfit, so I don't want you running the channels. I want you to just get you back into the player, hold it up, we play from you. Had we not had him, it wouldn't have worked, because playing out and not having a target, which is the 9 to hold the ball up, that's why people struggle. Because ultimately, get the ball into the 9 because he's going to score. She's going to score.
Yeah. And then Flackwell Heath came along, where you had sort of 2 consecutive spells as player manager.
Yeah.
Were there different principles there to Hounslow Borough, or was it sort of the same stuff?
Well, I was sort of in charge then.
Okay, so
and obviously it was me and Sparksy at the time, and it didn't really last that long. But Flackwell, I had a pre-season where we did training and we played football, and the pitch was amazing. And I said, we're going to play football. And and the second time I went back, maybe I shouldn't have gone back, because the first time we played football, and I think they ended up getting promoted, but I'd already gone, because, you know, listening to people, you can't play that way. It's like, we just have played that way. And, you know, the last few games, when it comes down to it, let's not take any risks. hang on, we've been taking risks for the whole season. We've been playing out from the back. The same player that started that 30-pass goal that you clapped and went unbelievable has fallen over, and they've gone and scored. Do we then have a go at him? And he's like, well, hang on, you're telling me to play out from the back. Now I've fallen over. You're now having a go at me. So this is where it's then down to the manager.
Definitely.
So then you went into coaching as like a condition coach, which I think is pretty important. We were speaking before about Ange, we were speaking before about what Thomas Frank could potentially bring to Tottenham post-injuries. So why was it important for you to go and do that?
Some of the players that I was at Brentford, some of the players that had gone into management then started sort of talking to me about the fitness, and I'd been doing this fitness thinking it was fitness for football. And I don't really talk about fitness as in stepping away from football, because fitness is just playing football. So a football coach can work on football fitness. You know, a fitness coach thinks he's talking about football, and he's actually not talking about football. He's talking about general fitness. So when at first I was, let's do some fitness stuff. Stop teams from stretching, static stretching before training, before games.
What would you replace that with? So you mean like if you static stretching is when you're standing still, and you pull your hamstring?
So basically, Torquay. So Paul Buckle took over. He was at Torquay, and we spoke, and we talked about stretching. I was like, stop the static stretching before training, before games. And he's like, why? Like, well, there's still no evidence to say that it reduces injuries, improves performance. This has been going for years. So if you're going to stretch, you dynamically stretch. So make it look like the football movements. Make it look like what you need to do. And he was like, okay. So they stopped static stretching, and they didn't have. So from November to May, and they got to the final of the playoffs, they didn't have any injuries. So every week, and he's had the smallest squad. They were relegation candidates, and they got to the playoff finals and lost in the final to Stevenage, their worst game. But they had no injuries, and players were coming on loan, and the teams were saying, "Wow, they look amazing." Because we just literally stopped them static stretching. If they wanted to stretch, they stretched before they went to bed. But they dynamically stretched, and it was like all these players become really, really fit and sharper in football. And turning, nobody beat the centre-backs over the top. You know, turning, they looked like they were, and there was no injuries. Every week, any injuries? Nope. Played with the same team and the same small squad. And they got to the playoff finals.
Really impressive.
And I wouldn't say that was me, because that was Paul Buckle, because he thinks outside the box, and he's like, okay, explain why. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we'll do it. And some of the players were like, what do you mean? And these players were getting niggly injuries before. They didn't get niggly injuries. They got into the team of the season.
That's really impressive. And then what? So when you moved then to Bristol Rovers and Luton, did you keep the same?
That was with
Paul Buckle.
Bucks. Yeah. So and when Bucks went, and then it was more. So then I got into the sort of the rehab side of it. In terms, I'm not a physio, and I don't say I'm a physio, but in terms of like getting players back, return to play, I think I'm quite good.
Yeah.
But it was, and that's where it's not fitness; it's just playing football. But the return to play is set different, because there's more risk factors. There's an increased risk of players getting injured again. So then it was like, can you look at this player? What do you think? Well, it's not really hamstring. You know, if you poke the bear, the hamstring will end up going again. So if you give the hamstring time to recover, and you don't whack it with loads of other stuff that's inconsistent, irrelevant, lack of evidence. He's playing again. Really?
So what do you occupy your time with now, then? 'Cause obviously, coaching's sort of done for you, and so playing, obviously.
So I teach level 2 fitness to sort of college players, and level 3 personal training courses. I started doing that a few years ago just because of in terms of teaching. I haven't got a teaching degree, but I've got a tutor qualification, so I'm qualified to teach or tutor what I'm qualified and experienced in. And it's good because then the diversification, breaking it down in terms of football and things like that, you know, you go in a class and you teach, and then you go in football, and then that's, you know, when you go, they don't get it, maybe you haven't explained it well enough.
Well, last one from me then. Obviously, I asked this question to any guests that come on the podcast. Looking back to like 3-4-year-old you growing up in love with the game, would you say that you're sort of happy with how your career's gone in terms of managing and playing? No,
not really. But it is what it is. you just have to deal with it. Had I been able to change things that I did and didn't do, definitely would have changed things. In terms of like coaching now, I'm still trying to educate myself in coaching and rehab and fitness, teaching, because if I improve, then hopefully I can help.
So in terms of what you'd do if you were a player today, how would you change your career? What's like one main thing that you'd do to make your career possibly better? We wouldn't know if it would become better, but what would you try and change?
I would try to do the best I can to have the longest career. So anything that would help me sustain a career in football. So not drinking alcohol, going to bed, like all that, everything. And you look at people like Ronaldo and you look at people like Thiago Silva, it's not a coincidence that they played for that long. Now, we don't know 100% what they do, but we see some things that they do, and I don't think they're going out at night. I don't think they're smoking and drinking. I don't think they're going to bed late. Don't think they're eating crap. They probably did, but if you can do everything you can to because once you've finished, we just still want to play football. And so, you only have a little, window of a career, and you should be doing the most you can to get out of football.
So, Andy, we really appreciate you coming on. We always end it on here with a handshake. So the middle camera's here, so bring it in. Thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Harry as well.
Pleasure as always.
And the hard one's always across the table.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Pleasure.
it, Andy. Thank you.